Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is a premiere. We have got two developers on the channel with us here today. We are going to do a deep dive into Chaos Tech and Forbidden Tech. Huge shout out and a huge thank you to JF and to D, who are going to be the developers that you're going to be talking to, going to be hearing from here on the show today. It's a deep dive, and when I say deep, I mean it is deep. We are going to how to use the Chaos Techs, how Chaos Techs work in general, a bit of information about the actual foundations of it, where the future is of gear within Star Trek Fleet Command. It's so insightful, it's so good. Grab some popcorn, grab a drink, sit back, enjoy, and let's discuss Chaos Tech and Forbidden Tech. I'm delighted to say, obviously, the first person that we're going to mention is somebody that we have seen a little bit in the past, obviously been involved in the last few arcs and been on a bit of content recently. We've got Dom and D. How are you? And what sort of involvement have you had with CTs and FTs recently?
Hey, happy to be here. This is my second arc. My first arc was Continuum, so just happy to go in and chat about Wrath of Khan some more. When it comes to CTs, we basically just worked on introducing some new ones here, as you've been able to see here, right? But otherwise, I was there just to be a guy who overlooked what was happening with that feature. And this is where you can cue in JF, because he was the one that was actually owning most of the direction for all of the cities that you're seeing in Wrath of Khan.
Absolutely. And just for anybody that doesn't know you, I don't think there are many people that don't know you, but just give us a quick background on your position in Scopely. What do you actually do at Scopely, and how long have you been there?
Oh, sure. Officially, when it comes to this part, I joined Scopely about a year and a half ago. I was a Star Trek player, STFC player before, so it was just, they gave me an option between Monopoly Go and Star Trek. It was very easy for me to pick Star Trek at the time. It's been a year and a half. It's been quite the ride. I started working with some quality of life improvements at a different team, and then with Continuum, I ended up kind of transitioning into this content sphere, and now here I am on Breath of Khan, and then kind of already getting ready for the next challenge in November and December.
Oh, November, December, we've got another Dome and Arc. Exciting. Looking forward to that. And JF, similar for you, I think it's the first time ever that you've appeared on content. Your voice is finally getting out there on the airwaves, I think this is the first time. Give us a brief background into your Scopely history and what you've done more specifically with the Wrath of Khan arcs.
All right. So I have been working for Scopely for a little over a year now, and for the first while, it was as a contractor, just doing some communication work on the website. And now I am moving into more of a product-oriented role. I spent the last couple of months shadowing Doman and learning from him and helping out with the Wrath of Khan arc, and in anticipation of being trained to eventually, hopefully one day, run an arc of my own. And I have, as Doman said, I was heavily involved in the testing of several things here, like the Chaos Tech that came out. I greenlit those and made sure that they were appropriate. And I also was the driving force behind Fleet Commander Khan.
Right.
Prior to that, my handiwork can be seen in the solo wave defense and delete solo wave defense hostile tuning, as well as the augment exiles. I was very involved in testing those in depth to make sure that the challenge was on point, even for the highest end players, which is a bit of a pet project of mine, as I believe that the level 70s in this game are poorly served with actual meaningful challenge.
Absolutely. I think some people will moan at you because you've made things very much more difficult. Obviously, you've started adding some more complexity into the hostiles and things, which I think is tremendous and very much needed. But you are correct. The upper echelon of the game, before all the things you've just mentioned, the more recent additions, there was nothing that they couldn't kill easily. There was nothing they couldn't run a loot crew on. There was nothing they could just go out there and just grind basically for all of eternity. But it's not been funny. That's boring, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And I think that was the whole point in making it more difficult.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, look at it this way. I took a look at what was on offer for level 70 players and said to myself, everything in the game is currently killable with a tier 9 epic. The epics go up to tier 18.
Yeah.
What motivation do people have to really push the limits of what their ships can do if there isn't anything there that can push back at them?
Absolutely, and there needs to be a challenge. The whole point of this is that it's supposed to be fun. One of the best parts about this whole game is when you can't do something. So then you use the tools and the services that are available to you, the buffs that are available, the officers that are released, and you put together that jigsaw to be able to actually get to a point where you can kill a specific target, where you can achieve a certain goal, where you can grind better than you could ever grind before. You can make things quicker and easier and cheaper. Do you know what I mean? That's the whole part of it being a strategy game, isn't it? Is to use all the tools. And I think that dovetails really nicely into obviously a discussion about chaos tech and forbidden techs. But I think to start off with, thank you so much for joining. I do really appreciate you both. But let's just quickly talk about the history of forbidden techs and then more recently chaos tech. So the purpose of these, I think the easy way for this to be described to anybody that wasn't super familiar with forbidden tech and chaos tech is it works on like a gearing style system, doesn't it? So it works on like in other games where you would get a posh sword that had certain abilities, or you had jazzy boots that did something additional specifically for your characters. But one question that I wanted to ask, I think it'd be a good one for you to take, JF, it seems like you've been involved in it quite heavily, would be why not just add additional researches? Why do it in this manner?
Okay, well, there's actually a very good answer for that. So you know how we have the fleet commanders, right?
Yeah.
Well, fleet commanders, despite being individuals, like they're people from Star Trek, and despite being people, just like officers, they bear far more in common with a research tree than they do with an officer, right?
Agreed.
Their buffs, once they're researched, they apply to the entire fleet. They are basically whole account enhancers. So that in that case, they're no different than a research tree. And with Forbidden and Chaos Tech, despite the fact that these are objects, they are not people. They have far more in common with our officers than they do with researches. Because just as you cannot put like Honor Guard Worf on 3 ships at once, you cannot put a Tantalus field on 3 ships at once. You've just got the one. You decide where it goes. And just as we've got the upper deck, the bridge crew, and then the lower deck crew slots, I believe the best way to view Forbidden and Chaos Tech is Forbidden Tech would be the bridge crew slot, and Chaos Tech would be the lower deck slot for this feature. It's not intended to be a whole account thing. You should approach these the same way you do officers.
Really, really valid point. I think, again, for anybody that's not totally passé with these, you apply these to a ship. So you get a ship, obviously it appears up here. You unlock the ability to actually assign a Chaos Tech or a Forbidden Tech to that ship, and then you stick it on that ship. So if I go back into my ship screen here, we can see that obviously I've got 2 additional slots here, ironically next door to my officer slots. And then you've got your slot there for Forbidden Tech, which I have none on at the moment on my relativity specifically. But then I've got a Chaos Tech actually slotted in that slot. And some of my ships have none on. Some of my ships, like my Borg Cube that I use every single day, it never runs without 2 on it. And obviously they are interchangeable and you can swap them around, very, very similar to officers. And I think that's such a fantastic way to describe it, that don't see them as researchers, even though the buffs read similar to researchers. They are basically officers with multiple abilities. On the bridge and the below deck officer slot, I think that's such a really good analogy as well. When you look at your Forbidden Techs, I think I can quite comfortably say that these are slightly more impactful, these are a bit more powerful, and they're a little bit more generic. So they cover wider areas of use within the game. Like, for example, if we take the Metreon Cascade, damage against hostiles, that's all hostiles. Increases hull health, that's all across the board. Crit chance against hostiles, all hostiles. Do you know what I mean? So they're pretty broad and pretty useful everywhere. Whereas when you dive into the Chaos Tech side of it, they are a lot more specific. So if we look at like the Omega Molecule, for example, we can see here increases Crenum temporal wreckage when using the USS Relativity. They're a lot more specific, aren't they? They're a lot more tuned to either a particular ship or a particular scenario. However, it seems here that we've got like a increase base crit damage as well as the relativity bonuses. What's the thought process, Doman, behind having like two abilities that look specifically for the relativity, and then another one. I mean, what's the purpose in obviously having that one in there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's the kind of the decision behind us establishing this sort of philosophy for chaos tech. It's very similar to what JF was mentioning when it came to the general comparison with officer abilities and below deck abilities. And to some extent, you could go even wider and say that like it's not just that these officer abilities end up let's say dictating how we think about the abilities. It's also like wider, like sometimes you compare them to some of the forbidden tech buffs and stuff like this. But the general philosophy for chaos tech, like you were already saying, is basically like this is something that ends up being much more accessible to players, not just in terms of upgrading, but also in terms of how they interact with it. So you are able to swap this much more freely with other ships. It's not just something that you put on your ship and you kind of leave it there, just like a lot of players do with Forbidden Tech. So when it comes to these slightly more niche scenarios where we're kind of taking a look at something like the electromagnetic loot from all the way back from update 72, right? You end up having this very specific focus on a specific loop that it's targeting, but then we also want to make sure that there is some general value out there as well, so that it's not just purely specialized. And this is where that part comes in, where you were asking me about it. That's why we have some generic buffs, and that's why we have some specialty buffs, just to kind of have like a general balance between whatever we are offering with the chaos tech, right?
What
whereas,
that does,
just to add to that, just to add to that, like, whereas for the forbidden tech, right, it's going to be much more general and broad in terms of what it does and how it affects your gameplay experience, basically.
Yeah, and it prevents obsolescence as well. Like we take the electromagnetic loop, 'cause it's the one I've got up at the moment. It's two abilities that are key to a particular scenario or ship are based on Monavine grinding. They're based on killing Texas class hostiles. Texas class hostiles now, they're in the archives. There's a potential that people are never going to use, they're never going to pull their Monavine out again, ever. They're never going to need it. So if it didn't have that third ability in there, which for the electromagnetic loop, fighting non-armada hostile, start of each round, increasing isolytic cascade, which again, cascade only ever comes from officers, and now obviously chaos techs. This is actually an ability that you will be able to use in perpetuity. You'll be able to use it forever. Whereas the other two potentially have little value to a more advanced player. But what they also do, again, this is another huge thing about Chaos Tech, specifically when they are geared towards a loop. You imagine if you've just hit Ops 40, you're just unlocking your Monavine. I suppose you look at these, and these are designed for those players as well, aren't they? How impactful are these going to be for a new player? And does that sort of thing, when you're looking at these, do you gear them towards, right, I think this is more for a new player to the Monavine, but less towards a less 60 player? Do you gear them towards ops level and progression sometimes when you're designing these, JF?
Absolutely. I mean, what you said about preventing obsolescence with the general ability is right on point, because if you look at this, just look at the isolytic cascade bonus that the electromagnetic loop provides. That ramps up to 30%, which is equivalent to a tier 4 Enterprise E data or Janeway on the bridge.
Obviously, because that ability is for 3 rounds. Obviously, it's adding it in for the 3 additional rounds afterwards.
Mm-hmm. So it starts at 10, then on round 2 and onward it's 20, and then on round 3 and onward it's 30.
Which is massive. I mean, people that have only got a tier 1 Janeway, they've only got a tier 2 of Enterprise E data. You're basically throwing an extra one of those at max on your bridge. Yes, it takes a little bit of ramping to build up. So what that again's doing is it's not making the likes of Janeway or E data obsolete. It's giving you an addition. It's adding to it.
Yes.
It's just like an extra tool.
Exactly, and extra tool is exactly right. Just as there is only one Janeway, there is only one Enterprise E data, and below deck there is only one Strange New Worlds Chapel.
Yeah.
But now there's an electromagnetic loot as well. Suppose you want to send a bunch of ships out farming and you want to make sure there's ISO cascade on all of them. Well, now you have even more tools to do so.
Yeah.
Because the difference between having no ISO cascade and having even 10% ISO cascade on a ship is gigantic.
It's substantial. I mean, you look at something like the Gorn ships that they only take isolytic damage. So you wanted to go out and do a heavy grind on that. You could have Chapel on one ship, Janeway on another ship, you could have Data on another ship, and you could have the Loot on another ship. 4 grinding ships. Or you combine the 4. You could have all 4 running on one ship and just go absolute all in on one ship and maybe use it as a punch-up mechanic. I mean, using the specific abilities and the generic abilities of the Chaos Techs to actually get you that extra edge, whether it be in PvE, PvP, or a specific loop, I just think it's absolutely huge. Now, let's talk about a couple of the sort of elephants in the room when it comes to Forbidden Tech. So Forbidden Techs, they feel a little bit more forgotten, and this could be something that maybe has been done on purpose, but we haven't had any new Forbidden Techs launched for quite a while. Everything's been gearing towards the Chaos Techs. So what's the Scopely mindset around the fact that Forbidden Techs, new launches of them seem to be a little bit more, it feels a bit like a retired concept now that we're not getting new ones added? Is that a conscious decision?
I would not call it a conscious decision to retire it. I would say that the pendulum swings. Like you may notice that there is an ebb and flow in the game when it comes to releases. There will be several months of PvP related officers that'll then followed by several months of PvE related. The PvP abilities may be geared highly towards offense, and then the next batch that comes out will be heavily geared towards defense. Right now, the Forbidden Tech has been receding a bit just to give the Chaos Tech room to just grow into itself and players to really get a good feel for how it works and how it differs from Forbidden Tech. Also, Forbidden Tech, as I'm sure you and many others are aware, currently caps out at level 55 out of 60 due to the inability to get a high enough assessment rank to level anything past 55. Yes, as you're right there. In order to even attempt it, you need to be able to have a 10% chance, and currently that is not doable because we don't have 5-star trials in yet.
Yeah.
And the decision has been mostly that we don't really want to delve further into Forbidden Tech until we can make sure that the Forbidden Tech experience is as well received when we return to it as the Chaos Tech is now.
Yeah.
Players are now quite used to how much easier it is to level up Chaos Tech, and there may be a bit of frustration and feeling like we've taken a step backward if we were to start dropping more Forbidden Techs without doing anything else.
I agree. And just to clarify here, so I am maximum assessment rank. So I have 6.5 million assessment rank, which is the highest that you can go to. And all 3 of my 4-star trials are now complete. So just to clarify where my account is at the moment. And I cannot take this above 55. So I think it's great. So it's great that this is actually on your radar, that people cannot max out this content. And the assumption will be that tier 5 trials, when they launch, whenever that may be, that would then potentially give us the ability to rebut these, come back into Forbidden Tech being a thing again. We might get some new ones, but obviously the ability to max these at some point has to be on the timeline, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it was never the intention to have these be unfinished. I mean, if you, like you said, on your account, you have maxed out all of your 4-star trials, which means that you should have a full set of tier 5 trial keys in your inventory. They just cannot be used yet because we don't have the 5-star trials available to unlock. But the tier 5 trial keys were in the rewards for the tier 4 trials, if you look in there. Yeah. See? So they just don't exist yet, so you can't use it. But I mean, you can clearly see that the intention is there to have it finished. It just has not come to pass yet. And part of that, I imagine, was due to other frustrations with the system, like the success chance and the strong gates on all of the materials and all that. I mean, Chaos Tech was in many ways a way of addressing all of that while also trying a different way. The intention is always to take what was learned from Chaos Tech and return to Forbidden Tech when when we're ready.
Yeah. And again, just to clarify that for anybody that's not sure, obviously, when you are looking at an upgrade of a forbidden tech, you will have known and probably been plagued, as I have in the past, by a percentage chance. So where you only have a chance to do it. Now, by failing it, you do get some Q's benevolence, which can help give you additional percentages to chance to actually upgrade. But any upgrade that you do with forbidden tech, until you're 100%, you're running an RNG. You're running into the random number generator to see if you can actually do that. They did a bit of a you said we did in terms of when they launched Chaos Tech. Chaos Tech upgrades now, they require no percentage chance. They are always guaranteed, upgrade guaranteed for them all, which was a massive, massive piece of player feedback that people were spending a long time, because when Forbidden Tech first launched, it was very, 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 very difficult to get the likes of tier-up catalyst. Tier-up catalyst sourcing was a huge bugbear of people. It was really difficult, and sometimes you spent weeks to try and accumulate enough materials just to only have an attempt at an upgrade, and if that failed, you'd put yourself back weeks. So the feedback that you took on that to then make the updates, the upgrades, guaranteed on Chaos Tech, I think is absolutely superb. But also the flow of the materials, the upgrade resources, like the Chaos Matter, the Chaos Reactors, the Chaos Tech tier-up catalysts equivalent. Do you know what I mean? The flow of those has been so much better than it ever was for Forbidden Tech that I don't know if you would agree with this. I don't hear anybody moaning about upgrade materials for Chaos Techs.
Yeah, although just that being said, it might not be the best thing. It's possible that, like, to some extent, we have overstretched with how much Chaos Tech materials we're sourcing, like, over time. Because, like, at the end of the day, things do need to be challenging to some extent.
Yeah.
But, like, definitely it was intentional that it's something that's much easier to acquire and achieve. And actually, I think that's one of the good points and good learnings coming from the SS relevant loop. That loop, for example, is entirely focused on materials, and Chaos Tech just kind of ends up being like a sub loop on the side. I think that's, like, very nice to just kind of take this as a learning and try to provide, like, a similar experience in the future as well, where you have this new loop that has this crazy main value, but then on the side, it's also providing you like an extra inflow of this side currency and this side feature, because, like, of course, we also have the Chaos Tech sourcing and stuff like that in the Continuum refinery as well.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, absolutely.
So I think the final question on sort of the history of Chaos Tech and obviously and Forbidden Techs and things. I think one thing that we want to ask is, how do you foresee? Now, I know you won't give us any specific answers now, and I know you might not even know the answers right now. But at the moment now, we've obviously got Forbidden Tech, we've got Chaos Tech. Do we imagine that these two just continuing to evolve, or do we see perhaps an enhancement to the gearing system where we get a new type of tech, where we get an additional type which is going to be something else on top of? Do you foresee these being the only two, or can you imagine a time where we've got 3, if not 4, maybe different types of tech to apply to our individual ships? How do you see the future of technology at it? Because there is a case, isn't there, with obviously we all know, and it's well established, it's well known that power creep's a big thing. And when you start adding some of these quality bridge officer plus below deck officer style abilities to already powerful crews, power creep really is a consideration, something where you've got to, when designing, which I know is a key part of what you do, you've got to keep that balance whereby you're not making things too easy again, and you're not making it too attainable. But where do you see the future of Chaos Tech, Forbidden Tech going? Do you see just continuing, leaving it as we are and adding more, or do you see evolvements of additional layers of gear?
I think quickly pitch in, and then I would love to hear JF's thoughts on this as well. But yeah, definitely they are here to stay and they are here to evolve. If you kind of take a look at Forbidden Tech and Chaos Tech as a gear system in the game, I cannot say that we're planning to expand upon those two and add like a third slot, for example. That's not something that's currently planned, but I will say that, like, as the game develops, as the time goes on, I could totally see it as an option. But for now, definitely focusing more on Forbidden Tech and Chaos Tech. And also for Forbidden Tech, it's something that you're going to see develop and get refreshed, at least to some extent, like this year already. And it's something that we've also mentioned in the past in some of the Q&As, for example. So yeah, there's that. I would expect that right now, as we kind of push through summer, you might still see some more chaos tech, but then later on down the line, it might happen that chaos tech takes the backseat a little bit, and the forbidden tech starts being a bit more prominent. Because yeah, like going back to your point from when we started discussing this, it is kind of, you know, it's kind of time to breathe in some fresh air into this entire thing. Plus, of course, like all the existing pain points tied to forbidden tech, like what we just discussed, you know, is present, and we are of course aware of it, and we are looking to see to what extent and how we can actually address it. But yeah, I don't. Just curious to hear JF's thoughts here as well. If he has any like random ideas or thoughts on how he thinks these things could develop.
Well, my initial response to this is never rule out the expansion of a system that you may have thought was never going to be touched again. What just happened? We just got away teams revamped after years of no updates. I would never assume that I would never assume that anything is completely finished. There will always be room to go back and look at things. I'm sure nobody saw an update to away teams coming, and well, in my opinion, the away team update is pretty fantastic. It's well worth engaging in. And okay, so maybe Chaos Tech and Forbidden Tech are here and active right now. Maybe at some point in the future they will stop. They'll go into dormancy for a little while something else something else is the new excitement. But you should never just assume that it's done. And maybe after a while a third slot will pop up. Maybe it'll be something else entirely. Who knows? Maybe they're, like I said, the Forbidden and Chaos Techs are like are more like officers than researchers. Perhaps an interesting idea would be synergy between Forbidden and Chaos Tech.
Great idea. I had an idea. Do you want me to throw it out to you? So I had an idea where, like, because in other games where you do get gear, you can forge gear. So you can forge stuff to actually get better things. Yeah. So let's say, for example, you go into here and it allows you to, that if you merge your Metreon Cascade Warhead and it allows you to merge it with your Time Crystal, for example, you forge them two together. So you lose those two forbidden techs, but what you get out of that is the Metreon Time Crystal. Do you know what I mean? Which has a combination of those two in there. So like an ability.
I was thinking that's actually rather similar to what I was thinking about the synergy between the two. Like I was thinking something like, so we have Agamus as a forbidden tech, right? So if you've seen Lower Decks, you know who Peanut Hamper is. Suppose we had a Peanut Hamper Chaos tech, and there were unique bonuses to Agamus and Peanut Hamper that only applied if both of them were on the same ship.
That's brilliant. That's a fantastic idea. And you could do it with like synergy between a Chaos Tech and a Forbidden Tech, wouldn't you? Have both of those on a ship. That's probably something that you could do to add in, and it gives a 20% boost to both of the different Chaos Techs by running them simultaneously.
Yeah, or perhaps they would be put, or perhaps as to what you were saying before, the combination bonus could end up being something completely different than what either one of them could do on their own. Just
it could be something for new content. It could be something for new content. So like we was talking about, the Monavine stuff might be irrelevant to a certain subset of players, but then you basically, by forging that with something else or by combining it with something else, it's not for the Monavine, it's for specialty ship from July 2026. Do you know what I mean? It's that specialty ship where it converts the ability into being able to be used for that, as opposed to being able to be used for its original purpose. So you're bringing life back into old bonuses and old upgrade materials that you've put in by making that combination between them. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think that's really good.
It's that sort of thing. This game is at its core all about options, and you mentioned earlier solving the jigsaw of trying to figure out how can you defeat this target with what you've got at your disposal. Well, maybe you feel like you can't, but maybe you can if you just find the right combination. And the more combinations that exist, the more varying ways to make use of all the tools at your disposal, then the deeper the game gets and the more interesting it can get.
And that's the fun part of the game. It's not going out and killing 25 hostiles in one hold, coming back to complete a daily or complete an event. That's not the super fun part of the game. The fun part of the game is, well, I can't do that. How do I use the things to be able to get an edge, to be able to do better, to be able to defeat that target that I couldn't beat before, punch up where I shouldn't be able to, and that's what these things are designed to do. Similar with officers and everything like that. No, fantastic. I think that's a great discussion around the history, the potential future, how things work. I think that's a really good deep dive into how Chaos Tech and Forbidden Tech actually work as a principle. But what we're going to talk about now is we're going to talk about some of the newer Chaos Techs that have been released in the last couple of releases. So we'll start off the one that was released during Wrath of Khan Part 1, and we'll start off with the Genesis device. So the Genesis device, just quick for everybody, this is, as we talked about before, this is geared towards a specific subset, a specific ship, and that is the SS Revenant. So it provides shots when fighting the Type 3 armadas. It provides critical damage for the Revenant against Borg polygons, so both different types of its specific target. You get buffs against both of those, and then its generic ability, which you could use on any ship, is an increase of SHP, so giving that increase in there. So when you're looking at this, then I think a good thing to talk about would be, did you see this as a buff that was more for people that were new to the SS Revenant, or did you see it more for people that were that were a bit further into the loop? How did you sort of see this coming in? Because like I said, this is a rare Forbidden Tech. Where was this pitched, JF, when it was being designed?
Well, I think that a good thing to compare this to would be the Borg Alcove Forbidden Tech that was released at around the same time as the Voyager. As you can see, it's rather good when it's leveled up, but a higher level Voyager isn't going to need it nearly as much.
Yes, I mean increasing hull health on
yes,
Voyager. There's nothing in the Delta Quadrant space that a maxed out Voyager, for example, cannot kill.
Is going to have any trouble with it all.
Yeah,
no.
nothing.
And similarly, a maxed out SS Revenant will have no trouble defeating the highest level Borg Type 3 solos with no difficulty whatsoever. However, it's worth noting that the Revenant needs to go through several evolutions to do that, and what this does allow you to do is the very first evolution of the Revenant, what the Revenant Mark II, what that does for the ship is it grants it an additional 10 shots, the same as this device. So what this device lets you do is, what the Genesis device does for your Revenant is, if you freshly build a Revenant, if you are a brand new Revenant owner and you also purchase the Genesis device or acquire it in a different way and then level it up to maximum, you are essentially skipping the first evolution of the Revenant. You can jump right in and start hitting the Borg Type 2 .1s. Because these are balanced. The .1s are balanced with a large apex barrier, requiring you to be able to deal enough damage to get through them, and that's why the Mark II Revenant grants an additional 10 shots per gun against these things. So if you get that instead from the Genesis device, you can start right off the bat hitting instead of attacking the level 40 Borg Typo 3.0s, you can jump right in and start fighting the level 40 Typo 3.1s.
Wow. Yeah,
you see that bonus unlocked? It's the same bonus.
Would that stack? So you'd end up with double?
Oh yeah, it would, but again, that's not an issue because the Type 1, the Typo 3s are not intended to be the real challenge for Revenants. That you're supposed to be able to fight them. You're supposed to, but they are. It's a Armada only loop, right? So I mean, if you can't kill the Typo 3s, then you can't engage with the Revenant loop at all. So it would.
Yeah.
The actual tough bit there are the polygons, and you may notice that the Genesis device does not give 10 additional shots against the Borg polygons.
No, so but again, if it did do that, what that would do is that would basically render the necessity to actually upgrade that ship once you've got a team of 2 or 3 people in there with that CT. It basically renders the loop dead. Do you know what I mean? Because it would just be too easy.
I would hardly say dead because while the .1s have the large apex barrier, but the .2s really ramp up their damage, which is why you need to evolve the Revenant to Mark 3 to get your own giant apex barrier to match it.
Yeah.
So and also you definitely want to keep upgrading the Revenant, because the higher you go with it, the better the material refinery is, and that material refinery is totally something you want as maximized as you can.
Absolutely. I mean, from a material standpoint, I mean that thing flows materials in like nothing ever has in the game before.
Yeah. So what the Genesis device really is good for is if you are just getting started with the Revenant loop, or even if you're not, because you'll notice the second ability is a massive increase in critical damage against the Borg polygons, so it will help for everybody. Even a level 70 person with a maxed out Revenant will struggle to defeat a polygon entirely by themselves unless they're using ship buffs. Genesis device might give them the edge they need to not use any consumable resources to kill those things.
Absolutely. So you're saving all of your all the juice and stuff that you've got, all your buffs for obviously other loops and things, because you've replaced the necessity to use Cerritos, to use your Defiant, use your Titan or something like that. You've saved that for another loop. With this CT, is offering you the additional shots and all that sort of stuff that it needs, and a 300% boost at max, and then a 1500% for your general ability as well in terms of SHP. They're not small numbers.
Good. And the other thing to remember here is that, especially when it comes to the shield HP, that is a rather large number if you happen to be a G4 player.
Yeah.
And you may also notice that we have just released with Wrath of Khan Carol Marcus, which is the lower deck equivalent of Catherine Janeway's captain ability. She will boost your shield mitigation every time you get hit.
Yeah, below deck Janeway.
Which means that hostiles that are firing at you, almost all of their damage is going to go straight to the shield. So you combine that with a big shield buff from Genesis device, and you have a very sturdy ship that will combat having taken almost no hull damage.
And remember, the standard, obviously, mitigation of 80-20, the majority does go to shields, but the more you can throw at the shields, the less you're taking to your hull damage. Because if you lose shield...
Look at it this way. Suppose you were to combine Carol Marcus down below with Strange New Worlds Pike up top.
Yeah.
You could achieve close to or even above close to or 100% shield mitigation just from the very first shot you take, and which is just as good as using a fully synergized Janeway, which people do enjoy using, but has fallen slightly out of favor lately because of the lesser impact of the Voyager crew bridge abilities compared to some of the more recent things.
Yes, but I mean, it's still a fantastic crew. It still is,
but now you can use it just with now you can get the benefit of that crew without having to do that. You get it right from the lower deck, and that in turn makes big shield buffs like what you can get from the Genesis device a lot more important, especially for lower level players who may not have access to buffs of that size yet.
Yeah, and I think anybody, because I've seen people do this before, I've seen people even mention this, that they don't focus on shield because they don't lose shield to anything. Wait until you start taking on some of these bigger targets. I mean, wait till you start taking on some of the bigger targets. As you progress in the game, shields become relevant again. They were so relevant in really early game. They maybe felt less relevant in the middle, even though they weren't in today's society, in today's economy. As you start to progress and want to be punching up, losing your shields is a very, very quick, sure way to be dying. So don't ever ignore those shield buffs.
Especially if you're running shield mitigation officers, because if you're running shield mitigation officers like Wrath of Khan, Carol Marcus, and Strange New World Pike, then you are essentially relying on the shield as 100% of your defense. If your shield fails, you have no defenses left on your ship whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So really good CT, really, really nice to see, and it has multiple uses. I think we've got a couple of little crewing tips there, which was really nice to get from JF, which is always good. Let's move into the Wrath of Khan Part 2 ones. Is there anything else, Doman, that you want to add on the Genesis device? Anything that you think that we haven't covered from that quickly before we move on to the Wrath of Khan Part 2 stuff?
No, we've covered enough. Let's move on and let's take a look at what we have in 79.
Excellent. So, Rathakan Part 2, Update 79. We're going to start off with, at the bottom, we're going to start off with the uncommon. We got an uncommon, a rare, and an epic this month. We're going to start off with the Ceti Eel. Now, the Ceti Eel is very inexpensive in terms of if you wanted to buy that CT, and you would expect that because it's of an uncommon variant. It's nice to see uncommons being added in. I mean, obviously, we've got four CTs that are uncommon. It's always nice for everything not to always be epic and rare. So it's obviously geared at a slightly lower price point, which is nice from a purchase standpoint. But then when we look at the abilities, they sort of reflect that as well. I mean, increased base weapon damage versus group and solo armadas, maxed out at 600%, and increased base weapon damage against hostiles and armadas of 100%. So you're sort of getting a stack off both of those when you're obviously attacking armadas, but then you're getting that hostile buff as well there at the bottom. Now, these numbers in today's game, when you look at them, if you look at them as a well-developed senior player, you would probably look at them and say that those numbers just bleed into insignificance with the amount of damage buffs everywhere else. But you talk about this from a lower standpoint, JF. They're not small numbers for somebody that's just getting into armadas at Ops 23 up to Ops 30 before they start approaching G4. They're not little numbers, are they?
No, they aren't. They aren't little at all, and especially when you consider that. Look back at the sorts of anti-armada officers that were released several years ago, like one of the earliest dedicated anti-armada officers that was released was Next Generation Riker, right?
Yep.
With his weapon damage bonus that would ramp up round after round.
Yep. And he was effective.
He was incredibly effective because back then there were no other ways to get numbers like that, and his it was the captain ability that. Sorry. So his officer ability was powerful too, but you see that, and if he was fully synergized, that would go up to something like 200% around. So that especially back then when armadas could easily last 20, 30 rounds because players didn't have the sorts of doomsday weapons at their disposal that they do.
Isolated damage even.
Yeah, there was even a thing.
And I do want to point out as well the thing about damage boosts. That damage boosts, you may look at it and think that a 100 or 200 or 300% boost, you may think that sounds insubstantial, but remember that doesn't only just boost your base damage. Any additional that you can get in terms of your damage output is also boosting your isolated damage and subsequently your isolated cascade as well. So every single damage percentage that you add on is adding to it in multiple factors, isn't it? Because of the way that
and also there's critical hits as well. I mean, you increase the base number and the multiplied number is going to be that much more impressive.
Exactly. So even though it may look small, I think this is still geared towards a younger player.
Absolutely geared to smaller players because larger players have. But then again, it's not like the higher end players are hurting for anti-armada options.
No.
For high end players have plenty of high end anti-armada options available to them, but it can't have escaped the notice of the player base that the vast majority of content that's been released lately has been for level 40 and up.
Yep.
But if you look at the Wrath of Khan arc, the Wrath of Khan hostiles, you can start engaging with them around level 28.
Yeah.
So if we're going to be giving players content to engage with starting at level 28, it really seems only appropriate that we also release chaos tech for that level range at the same time. I mean, if we're asking these players to engage, then we can't have them feel like they're being ignored.
No. If you're an Ops 26, 27, 28 player, go out and hit some augments. Get this CT, put it on your ship, max it out, which is relatively inexpensive to do so in terms of upgrade materials as well, because it is an uncommon. You will max it very, very quickly.
It's not a heavy lift to do that, even if the only chaos tech
kill is very, very low level, you should still be able to max out an uncommon.
And you will see an impact. You will see an impact. Check your logs before and after. As a younger player, you will see a positive net impact, and I think it will be more substantial than you think, especially as a younger player. Moving on to the rare. So the rare this month is the Omega Molecule. Now, the Omega Molecule, again, is one of those which is geared towards a particular ship, and it's geared towards the USS Relativity on this stance. So it has two abilities geared towards using the USS Relativity, which is increasing the temporal wreckage from the Krenim formation armadas specifically. So this doesn't work on the solos. This is only geared towards the formation armadas. And obviously, when maxed, that 100% becomes 1500%, which, when coupled with all of the other research that you can get towards your relativity, is not insubstantial at all. It is a very, very good bonus. And then the other ability, which is geared towards when fighting Krenim invading entities, which are obviously the solos, are 16,000 additional worth of Apex Barrier, which is very, very quick napkin math. It's basically giving you a 1.6 times your hull health net. That's very, very rough. Nobody quote me on that. Don't leave horrible comments. I'm using very, very roughly 10,000 Apex Barrier is a ballpark equivalent of doubling your hull health with the way that Apex Barrier works. So that extra 16,000 is 1.6 times the hull health that you've got because of the way that mitigation works. Not insubstantial. And then its other ability is base crit damage for whichever ship that it's on. This is a typo at the moment. By the time you watch this, this may have been corrected. It says increased crit damage for all ships. That is not a fleet-wide buff just by unlocking it. It is specific to the ship that you have got the Ceti on, like every other Chaos Tech and Forbidden Tech ability. It's just a slight typo in there that will be corrected shortly. But increased base crit damage, again, that maxes out at an additional 200%. But the power in this is in the relativity, right, JF?
Well, yes and no. For them, absolutely, this is intended to be like the absolute best CT that you could ever put on your relativity. And it's worth noting, when it comes to the Apex Barrier for the invading entities, there are not a whole lot of ways right now to give yourself Apex Barrier when you are fighting an Armada or an invading entity. Your options for those are very slim, and most of them are not going to be particularly effective, especially not in comparison to something like a 16,000 buff.
No, 6. I mean, I don't think there's anything else that offers a 16,000 buff, is there?
Not even remotely.
No,
not even remotely close. Not against an Armada or invading entity. And it's also worth noting that the relativity own ship ability provides a rather substantial damage bonus to those Krenim invading entities. And the relativity, and on top of that, yes, you see that. And on top of that, if you check the guns on the relativity itself, they are not weak. No, they are not atypical. Those aren't weak guns for a ship of its size.
They really aren't.
They're not. They fire multiple times. They fire quickly. Those are not weak guns. So you give those. So you already have, you see that it gets a rather large damage bonus to guns that are already pretty strong in their own right. And then you add the Apex Barrier on top of that so that it's taking much lower damage. And you'll have activity that can really, really punch up and really hit above its weight class in striking those invading entities.
Agreed. I mean, this is without the Forbidden Tech loaded. This is without the FT loaded. And mine is only tier 7. It's ballpark tier 8. It's almost tier 8. It's only level 35. I'm able to, again, I'm an ops 69. So my research in general might be slightly higher than other players if you're not at that ops level. But I was able to solo. Bear in mind, you can take 2 ships to these. I was able to solo a 62 with just my relativity, and I scraped by. Look at this, people. The importance of shields. If I didn't focus on some shield research, I finished this battle with 3.72 million shields. If that had gone 4 or 5 rounds earlier, bearing in mind this.
But the other thing to remember here is that this Omega Molecule Chaos Tech, that 200% critical damage is, combine that with the relativity's gigantic damage bonus against these things, you are going to see some pretty silly numbers coming out of that.
because not many people won't be running a crit chance increaser, so increasing your damage even more on top of a ridiculous. I mean, you saw my bonus, 140,000% damage bonus. Remember, that is what is applied to those base numbers that I showed you on the ship, along with all of your other research, to get to those ridiculous numbers that I showed you in the battle log, which is why when you look at the guns and you think, well, that looks a bit pathetic, 664,000.
Except it's not really.
It's not.
That's the tier 7 relativity. So it is appropriately compared to, let's say, do you happen to have a Sanctus or a Kuv Sumpek or something like that in your stable here? Yeah. No, check the guns on that thing.
So this is a max.
Bear in mind that yes, that is max. It is almost 3 times the size. And however, so those are bigger guns. But scroll down and look at their reloads and their shot counts. All the way down to the bottom
That's a bad example. Yeah. Go for this one. 2-2. Yeah.
Yeah. See 2-2-2. Now, whereas relativity has 4 guns. The Kuv has 3. The Kuv fires the guns, but they stagger a bit. The relativity is firing 4 guns on the first round, 2 on the second, all 4 again on the first, and it's really aggressive, really going out there. So yeah, maybe that. And you also have to bear in mind that if you wanted to do a proper comparison against a maxed Kuv, you'd probably want like a tier 9 or tier 10 relativity to compare that to.
And this is, for anybody not sure, this is the firing pattern of the USS Relativity on the brand new updated format of STFC.space, which looks fantastic, by the way. It's a fantastic bit of formatting. It looks great. But yeah, great firing pattern on that. And even though those numbers look small, and I looked at my Sompek there with, even if you look at these, you think, well, that's 650,000 compared to 65. My Kuv doesn't have a 140,000 based damage increase to it.
Yeah, exactly. And it also it's also the relativity would need several more tiers in order to be properly compared to a maxed out, because the relativity, bear in mind, your relativity is less than half the power of that ship.
Yeah.
So were they of equivalent sizes, you might see those guns matching up a little better.
Definitely. And plus, you're still getting the bonus.
For reference, the relativity at max maxes out around 20 billion power and has guns on par with a G6 rare.
Yeah. And the max bonus, again, just to add a bit of tech context, once you get it up to max tier, it's a 360,000% damage boost against those invading entities. So it really, really does scale. And you think the reason that this is all relevant is because we're talking about the specific chaos tech. We're talking about the the Omega molecule having a base 200% crit at maximum increase. That's 200% of all of those shots added as a net value because of the way that crit works.
Right. And the other thing to remember is this is, of course, coming as part of the Wrath of Khan arc, and it's worth remembering that this applies to any ship, not just the relativity. And what did we get last month? We got Fleet Commander Khan. What does he do? He increases your crit chance in PvP for all your ships. So what does that mean? That means Omega Molecule is a quite viable PvP chaos tech as well.
Yeah, and the thing is, it may not be on your biggest ship. Like for me, it might not be on my Borg cube. But what it might allow you to do is have a bit of an edge on another ship, like on my Sompek or on one of my other G6 ships. It's another option just to have that additional boost on something else. You might not swap it out for the likes of some of the other huge PvP ones, like the Cannon, like the. Do you know what I mean? Some of the huge ones, the Soren's Trilithium, the other big PvP CTs. You might not do that on your main ship, but this is super viable because it doesn't specify where this crit damage is used. It's everywhere. With no specification means it works everywhere.
Yes, and in PvP there are many tactics that people use. One that people are fond of is like the big glass cannon round 1 knockout shot. And if that's what you're going for, then what you want is something that boosts your damage as much as possible on the very first round, right? If you're trying to to throw your first punch and have there not be a second, then you want to front load everything you can into like that. That's what people were doing when they were flying around with Carol Freeman, Lorca, and Honor Guard Worf back when that was the big
Yeah.
thing in them. They were aiming for round one obliteration. So if you happen to favor that sort of tactic, then Omega Molecule is your best friend. It might actually be superior to any other chaos tech for that tactic specifically. But that's what that gets back to what we were talking about. It's the beauty of the jigsaw. There's so many things you could do, and there's so many ways to get there, and you just have to select the right tool for the right job.
Absolutely. And the best thing about these, remember, peeps, once you've put them on a ship, it's not stuck there. You can interchange these. You can swap them around. When you've got incursions coming up, you'll probably run a completely different set of CTs and FTs compared to when it's time to go out and do your normal daily inter-arc grind where you're killing 5 different types of hostile in a day or 3 different types of armadas. The whole point of this, and they have added additional sourcing for the transfer currency, because this was something that before this month, I would have brought this up. Obviously, Chaos Tech fusion rods, slightly less, but the Forbidden Tech fusion rods, I'm currently, nobody quote me, I'm holding 235,000, which is a ridiculous amount of these, by the way. There's going to be people shouting at me in the comments. I know there is. But these fusion rods were very, very difficult to source because it made it basically impossible for you to, on a daily basis, change things around. They are adding additional sources for these all the time, even coming as late as the Wrath of Khan arcs. We've now got boosts within your Augment faction store for you to be able to get more of these Forbidden Tech fusion rods. There's more and more of these added. So the whole point of these is that you take them off and you change them exactly the same as officers. You're moving them around. You're not going to go do the same job with the same officers every time. Same works for CTs. Now, you've got to be a bit more selective because obviously officers you can do for free, whereas the Chaos Techs, Forbidden Techs, obviously you need to be a little bit more selective because you will eventually run out of the materials to be able to change them if you do it too often. But don't just sit with the same ones on all the time. Use the abilities for you to get a bit of an advantage.
Well, you may notice that the price for removing an epic Forbidden Tech from a ship is more or less around what it's about 1.5 chests worth of the daily claim that's just been added. So the idea here was, okay, we get it. Players don't have the ability to change these out nearly as much as they would like. Then obviously nobody wants to feel like they've made a terrible mistake and now they have to wait a week before they can try it again. So, okay, you don't have to wait a week. You make a terrible mistake, try again tomorrow. And that's only if you have no stockpile at all. And now it's rather easy to build up a bit of a stockpile. There may be a cap on how many of these things you can get. Like I said, the 67,500, but that doesn't mean that you can't still. That's a pretty hefty stockpile. That would let you change quite a lot around. And also, I mentioned that the reason Forbidden Tech has been on hold is in part to let Chaos Tech really grow into its own and get its legs. And you mentioned the sourcing for the Chaos Tech parts has been a lot easier. Well, it has, and in some cases, maybe a little bit too much, but it's gotten to the point where it's rather easy we see a lot of players getting new Chaos Techs and immediately maxing them out without having to even do much of anything. And maybe that's a little too open-handed, but now we have all this data, so we can properly calibrate how much would be an appropriate amount of these materials to give out. And so now here we have several months after Chaos Tech has been developing and we've been paying attention to how people are using it. Now we have a drip for these Forbidden Tech rods, and it gives people just enough to really play with the system and swap things around a lot more freely without being so plentiful that people never have to worry about it again.
Absolutely. So you heard it here first that CT change rods are going to be sliced by massive, massive proportions in the very near future, thanks to JF. He's going to cut the sourcing for all of that. So acquire everything that you can as soon as possible.
You can reach me at my bunker in Antarctica.
So just to clarify again, 67,500 is the cap on that bundle, which is a relatively inexpensive bundle for you to be able to claim on a daily basis if you need to. The unequipped
cost... If you happen to have a Reliant, you can basically do that just with your daily claim, just with the daily bonus that the Reliant gives you.
Yeah. An unequip is 6,750. So basically giving you 10 unequips is your cap. So 10 abilities to unequip the CTs. And when you want to equip a CT, thinking, well, I might want to be able to do that.
That's free.
It's free. So it costs you nothing. The only cost that you've got initially with each ship, and again, this isn't if you've got 3 cost carriers, you'd have to do it on each individual one. You need to bear that in mind. That to actually unlock a slot, you do need to pay to unlock it. But to physically equip something that's not already on a ship, as you can see, I could put Agamus there on my cost carry, and it's free. It costs no fusion rods to be able to do that. But then when I want to take him off, that is when it costs the currency to be able to take it off. But equipping is free. It's only taking off or swapping. So if I want to swap the Tantalus field on, you can see that I can swap it, but basically what that's doing is you're paying to take it off and then getting a free putback on, which is why it's exactly the same cost in relation to those rods. So it's not...
And we are not ruling out the addition of more cost efficiency for fusion rods in the future.
Which is fantastic.
Like to lower different, there's already various fleet commander buffs that grant cost efficiency to forbidden tech materials. We're not ruling out doing more of that in the future to reduce the cost of the rods.
Fantastic. And that I think that would be welcome. But like I said, the fact that they've added additional sourcing for them, that is the best way, I think, to do it. Just basically to make people live at that cap to allow people to play with this in essence as much as they want. Not many people are going to be swapping more than 10 epics a day, which is your cap, or in one particular day.
We want to let this breathe a little and see how the players feel about it. Like you said, there is a much steeper cost when you're unlocking a new slot on a ship, and that cost is higher the higher the grade of the ship. So if you roll out a couple of really big ships at the same time, or so, you may find yourself burning through your entire stockpile pretty quickly if you're trying to unlock those slots. But at the same time, you'll build it back up in a matter of like 2 weeks with how we've got it now. So I think overall players are in a much better position to really dive into the Forbidden Tech system and see what they can do with mixing and matching.
Yeah. And this is only for a Titan. So for the buffing Titan, not the G6 version of the Titan, to actually unlock this is 28,000.
Yeah, that's how much it costs to unlock a slot on a G4 ship. A G5 is slightly more costly.
Yeah.
And a G6 even more so. But again, the idea here is that if you are collecting enough of those rods to reach the cap to be cut off of anymore, you will have enough on hand to pop open a slot on a new G6 ship.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's basically what we can ask for, isn't it? And then you've got to go out, you've got to go do your grinds, you've got to get your materials. If everything was free and easy, then that defeats the object of playing the game.
Exactly. We want people to be able to engage with the content. We don't want people to feel like, oh, well, I have this new ship, and I would love to put my Forbidden Tech on it, but I can't even open the slot because if I just rely on the free-to-play drops, it's going to take me 2 months to build up enough rods to do this.
Exactly.
That's a little bit too much to ask, but it's, like you said, it's a lot more reasonable to go, well, I can open it all up and that will completely deplete my stockpile. I'll have to rebuild it, but I can do it. I can just start.
Exactly. And I don't think anybody would ask for any more. I don't think anybody would ask for, well, people would ask for more, of course they would. Everybody always wants more and they want it easier. But play the game, people, and go get what you need to do. Let's move on to the third and final Chaos Tech that was released during Wrath of Khan Part 2 Update 79, and that is the C12 Stasis Globe. Now, this is an epic, and just to go through what this one does, so this increases your hazard resistance, it increases warp speed, and it increases your hull health as well. So the starting numbers, you can see 14, 50, and 75 respectively. They cap out at 200% base hazard resistance, 2,000% warp speed, and then a 2,500% boost to hull. Now, this is not specific at all. This is sort of going against the standard genome of CTs, where you would use it on a particular ship and then have an ability maybe for all-rounder. This is an absolute all-rounder. 200% base hazard resistance is huge. Now, just offer this in just for a little bit of context. I have got a new Grange out here. Okay, now my new Grange is currently, I think it's tier 4. Yeah, so it's currently tier 4. And with the research that I've currently got unlocked at the moment, I wouldn't be able to mine in a 200% system. I'm at 195%. I've focused on that. Now my Selkie, because that has some additional resistance specific to it, is currently at 260. But you imagine if I could put, because the warp range on this is a 1523, I'm talking, this is a G6 focus CT. This is a G6 focus because of that hazard resistance element. But it means that I wouldn't be needing to mine down here at warp 1100 with my new range. Now, I can mine out here in this 6667 system with my new range, which has no hazard resistance. So it has no hazards in there, so I could mine out there. But that's a housing system. It fills up really quickly. So the factor is there that I need to get to a higher hazard. If I can get 200% hazard resistance, I could come out here, this one, and have 445% against this, against the ion storm, where nobody will be. Nobody will be out here. I can come and mine up here to my heart's content. The 400% systems I could basically live in with maxing out this CT, keeping me out of range of all of the majority of the players that don't have the CT, who are currently mining lower because they can't get their hazard resistance higher. I think it's a fantastic ability from that CT. Warp speed, always nice. Again, I will show you if I wanted to go to the very upper echelons with my beefy-ish Borg cube. I wanted to go to the upper echelons of the system. You can see here that it would take 7 minutes and 34 seconds. Adding 2000% to warp speed is substantial. There isn't another research in the game. There's nothing else in the game that I can think of that would offer up to a 2000% warp speed. I think there's a couple of artifacts, one of them doing up to about 1500%, if I remember rightly. It's that globe one. But give me some details. JF, what is the theory behind this one? Why is this going to be so impactful for players? And do you agree with me that this is geared towards the G6 guys?
Well, just as the uncommon chaos tech in this release was geared towards the lower end, the epic is geared towards the higher end. It only makes sense, right? You have the uncommon for the low level, and you have the epics for the epic level. So yes, this is absolutely, no question, a chaos tech that is for G6 players. If you are not G6, you will not really have that much use for it. This is entirely for people who are in G6. Specifically, the people who will gain the most benefit from this CT are the people in the level ranges of like 61 to 66 or so, because most of the good hazard resistance research is locked to the back half of G6. And one of the most common things that we hear from players is, how are we even supposed to do this? There's no way to survive in these systems. The hazard resistance is just, it is not even possible to get the numbers at the levels where, okay, maybe I can fly to this system, but I have like 100 something and this hazard is over 300. Okay, well, yes, that is correct. And we hear you, and now you should have a little bit of an easier time with it. Yeah, you see, that's a big hazard resistance. You need to be up 69 to even start it.
Yeah.
And like air sealed containment, that other one you've got over a little bit to the left there, you need to be pretty far into G6 before you can even begin that one.
And again, it's capped. I couldn't max this out yet until I get to 70. And again, this is only offering a 75% bonus. So these two researches, which I need to be up 70 to be able to complete, combined give me a 75 plus in this force field containment. These are the top researches, by the way, and 100%, 175% base hazard resistance between those two full nodes, which are not cheap. They are not cheap in terms of materials. They are not super quick to be able to get done. So they are big investments into your account, especially when you may be trying to, like I am, I'm trying to push to 70. I'm trying to get my Crenshaw. I need to be saving things for that push. And they're potentially too expensive. Like even this crappy research here for stations, and I say that, I shouldn't say that when we've got developers on, but a 25% damage buff for G6 ships against stations. Do you know what I mean? It's just useless to me. Absolutely useless to me. But I've got to work through it. So I've got to work through some more of these expensive researches before I even get to this one. Or we can get a CT, which we've talked about, is relatively inexpensive to upgrade because we've got fantastic sourcing on the upgrade materials. Now, I'm not saying because it's an epic you're going to be able to get it straight up to max on day one. It might take you a little bit of grinding, a little bit of work. You know what I mean? You might have to work on that. But we get this maxed out 200% straight away. You imagine if you're an up 61 player, there's also a $100 prime. Okay, there's a $100, £100, whatever you want to call it, prime. Currently in that. Yeah, less than half. I think it's only 75%. So the prime in here, which opens up as soon as you get into G6, nobody should be buying. Let me just find it a second, really quickly, guys. This one, prime hazard conditioning. You buy
it's,
this.
it's less than half.
Sorry, I thought you said it's half. So you buy this prime, for £100, $100, whatever currency that you're using. You're going to get a 75% buff, or you put that same amount of money into that chaos tech, and you spend a bit of time grinding out the materials and getting it. You're getting almost 3x. 3x would be 225. I mean, you're getting almost 3x value out of your money for that. So that chaos tech provides some outstanding value for this one ability alone. Like I say, if you don't go for that prime hazard conditioning, I never did it. I just muddled my way through. You've got these here, look, base hazard resistance, 40%. You have to max that one out. I was talking about the air seal containment, base hazard resistance. Still not maxed it yet because of the material spend. Maxes out 75%. There's then some other specific ones which are tied to ships. You've got some here that are tied to specific faction ships, but this chaos tech is specifically for no ship, for no faction, for no specific hazard. And the other thing as well, there is a hazard which has no specific research for itself, the nameless horror. There is no hazard resistance against the nameless horror hazard. This is giving you that 200% buff that you need. It's a really, really useful CT for G6 players, and definitely a go-to purchase. As soon as you enter G6, it will make your game so much easier.
There are two ships in particular that this CT you will absolutely see a massive benefit to using it with. The first one is, as you mentioned, the Selkie, the miner, because the Selkie is acquired at level 61 and is going to be the very first G6 ship that anybody acquires, because you need it in order to mine G6 materials. And so it's the first G6 ship everybody gets, and it's absolutely essential. And it does have the ability to survive in hazard because it has some specific, it has some Selkie specific hazard resistance research that's easier to access than the faction miner specific hazard resistance research. But at the same time, that research is locked to tier, and when you get to so if you want to max out that Selkie hazard resistance research, you need to tier up your Selkie a fair bit. And most people, when they enter into G6, they're not doing this so they can have the most awesome Selkie in the galaxy. They're trying to get to those uncommon ships. They want to see the next level of faction ship, right? They're not looking to get their Selkie up to tier 8 just so they can do better mining. But they need to do hazard mining in order to get their dailies done and to mine G6 in any reasonable amount of time. So the Selkie really benefits if you're just poking your feet into G6. If you're just getting into it, then this CT is a tremendous investment because it will provide a shortcut to you and you will not have to deal with all of that. You can get the hazard resistance you need with a fresh Selkie. You won't have to invest nearly as much into building it up. But then that's really the whole nature of a free-to-play model of online game, isn't it? What are you buying with your money? You're buying a shortcut, right?
Uh-huh. You're paying to make things easier. You're not paying to skip it. Yeah.
You're not. Yes, you're not bypassing the content. It's all about how would you like to invest your time. If you want to grind it out, that path is available to you as well. If you would like to skip it, that path is also available. You choose how you want to engage.
Yeah, and you mentioned that there was another ship. Is it the Borg Cube?
The Borg Cube. Yeah. It is the Borg Cube, because the Borg Cube is very frequently used in G6 because especially at the beginning, it is cheaper to repair than G6 ships, and it can handle the hostiles if you are doing it right. But what it can't do is handle the hazards, because there's no, as you pointed out, there's some special hazard resistance researches that are faction specific, but the Borg Cube is not a faction ship. It will crumple and die in a hazard very quickly because it has no, on top of not having a faction to benefit from that research, it also does not have its own Borg Cube specific hazard resistance research. So unlike, say, a Vindicator or GS31 that has
a specific node, a specific research node to basically make it impervious to all
the Borg cube. As you can see, you have not been in that system very long, and you are dying fast.
So as soon as I start thinking, this is the system that I actually physically grind my dailies out in. I've got to come up here and I've got to get 50 points worth of dailies. Not going to go into the mechanics of that. It's slightly different when you get into G6, how your dailies work. But if I start hitting the 71s, which are the most optimum ship for me to hit, because they give me 5 points towards my 50 that I need towards a day. So I need to kill 10 level 71s. But there's never enough in the system, so you're warping around. Now, in any other system that's not a hazard system, impulsing around just takes time. Just takes a bit of time to get between each individual hostile. But now, every single 10 seconds, because my hazard resistance, I showed you it obviously at the start when we was in, my hazard resistance currently for my Borg cube, because it's not faction, is 135 out of 500%. So I'm only mitigating like what 70% of the actual. I'm taking 75-80% worth of the actual damage.
It would be quite a bit. And even with the CT and even with the Prime and all of the hazard research you could muster, it's still
I'm not going to get to 500%.
Climb. It's still a steep climb to get to have your Borg cube surviving in a level 5 hazard. But however, that's also, as I before, that's not really what this CT is for. The people who are the people of your level have access to that better research already, and you can use this CT to push your other ships over the top and be able to do what you need to do with them. But the people at level 61, 62, 63, they have access to none of this. They go into these systems and they just die.
Yeah, it's massive. It's huge. But what the CT does for me specifically is it's going to take me up to sort of 300% odd. That basically nullifies 50% of the hazard's potency. So in terms of how much I can survive for, it's more than doubling my resistance. So it's giving me so much extra time in this system to make sure. There are times, like you've just seen me blow up to the hazard there. There's times when I haven't, because there hasn't been sufficient big level hostiles in that system, I've had to make 2 trips to actually finish my dailies in there. If there's 6 or 7 71s, it's easy. But yeah, that's just pot luck. That's just luck of the draw as to what hostiles that you've got in that system. Me adding 200% resistance to that is going to make such a significant difference to my ability to be able to grind my dailies out in one run, and not even just dailies. Armadas, solo armadas up here in G6, huge. So if I wanted to go do some of my solo armadas, the system that I use is up here. Let me just quickly throw. I have to be efficient, so I've got to throw my armada crew on there for me to feel like I'm doing something properly. If I wanted to go and start doing armadas up here, hazard resistance. Remember, I'm sat for 10 seconds at least in the circle. Plus, I've got the warp in between those armadas. Sorry, the impulse in between those armadas, and I've got the time it takes me to actually physically click the buttons. Every one of those times, I'm losing it. So if I start an armada here, I'm going to start it. Off it goes. I've then got an impulse into the circle. I'm 14 seconds away. And as it approaches the armada, as soon as it gets in, I can start it. But all this time, you look at my hull health, I've lost some more already. I've literally warped into the system. I've started the armada the second that I've got in there. I've waited for my armada to arrive. I'm going to speed it up. I'm still sat here for 10 seconds. This 10 seconds, I am losing hull. You can see my hull, you just saw it then drop again. At the bottom there, you can see my hull dropping before I've even hit the armada. When I pull the log up in a second, I'll show you the battle log, which will show you my starting hull, what I lost. You've got to use speed ups up here to actually get your armada started quickly. But if we jump into that battle log, I wasted no time. I was straight in, and I'd already lost all that black there on that battle log. That was pure hazard research. Pure hazards taking me out because my resistance isn't high enough. If I'm going to be doubling, if not 2.5 timesing my hazard resistance, this is basically a net gain of me of that amount to my hull that I will still have left. D, what value do you see in this CT, and where do you see it being used? Can you think of any other use cases where you think this could be a really good thing for you to use, D?
For me, this is more like, everything that you already mentioned, sure. For me, maybe one other thing, and like the use case that's relevant for me as a player, where I am currently moving towards the G6 because I'm not there yet. For me, this is going to be the chaos tech that I go and get when I am moving into my early 60s and trying to, see what G6 is all about and get kind of acquainted with the hazards for the first time, right? Like that entry level alleviation of that initial pressure that hazards give you. This is where this is going to be useful for me.
Absolutely. And I think for somebody that doesn't use hazards, it's probably like you wouldn't bother. Would you? But do you see value? Do you think about warp speed at the moment? Do you think about the time it takes you to get anywhere, not being a G6 player?
Right now, not at all. Like that's not a concern whatsoever.
Proving that point again.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm gonna see like quite a massive difference as soon as I get this chaos stack, and actually like as soon as I get it and then try it out without the chaos stack and then equip the chaos stack and actually see the difference.
Yeah, that hazard resistance for me is so good, and it has so many different uses to make your day easier. You are paying to make your life easier. You're not skipping anything. You've still got to go out and kill everything. You've still got to go do anything with it, but it's making life easier. You're getting there faster and you're surviving longer. Plus you're getting a pretty decent additional 2,500% HHP for obviously when you've got that maxed, which is going to let me kill even more hostiles. A fantastic CT in my opinion. Guys, have you got anything else that you want to add on the CTs that have been launched in the last 2 releases? Anything we haven't talked about? Anything that you think that we could go through?
Honestly, I think just here sitting in front of my PC and seeing both of you guys just nerd out, I think we've covered it incredibly well, and I'm totally happy.
Fantastic. Okay. That was Forbidden Tech. That was Chaos Tech. I want to say a huge thank you to both JF and D. Thank you for coming on today. I think it's been super insightful. I think you've got some fantastic ideas. You've given us a couple of little sneak peeks of what might be happening in the future with Chaos Tech and Forbidden Techs. And I think you've probably given some people some new ways to use them as well. People that were just throwing them on a ship and leaving it, I feel like they would maybe start using them differently, which I think is a very good result. Domen, anything else from you to add, mate? Anything else that you want to add? But thank you so much for being here.
My side, just thank you for having us. It's been a process being able to, just go in and chat with you on this. Super happy that we got to do it. Appreciate all the work that you do in the community and just how much value you bring to the table. I think sometimes you're like an unsung hero of the stuff that you do on your Discord. It's amazing. So just super happy to be here. Really loved hearing both you and JF talk endlessly about Chaos Tech, and looking forward to chatting with you in the future.
Thank you so much, D. JF, anything final from you, mate?
No, it was a very good discussion, and I appreciate that the intricacies of the design are not lost on all players. There are definitely the ones who just throw whatever they want on a ship and go for it, but the deeper game is there for those who want to play it, and your tool and the information repository on your Discord has been a really vital resource for those of us who do enjoy really going into the weeds. So thank you for having us today, and I'm looking forward to our next chat.
Me too. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.